is a recipe. A darn fine recipe, if you ask me. When do you buy rum and Coke? When you're thirsty. It changes the equation from when I need something to when I want something. Next one. Now, the reason this is so powerful is because of the way the human brain works. Neurologically, the human brain creates associations, and these associations are what drive consumer interest and satisfaction. Next one. So they look at two separate things, but in their minds, they see a third thing. And that third thing is what creates the interest to buy. Next. So we turn to neuroscience, and we put sensors on people's heads that have 64 connections and collect data 2,000 times per second while simultaneously tracking their eye movement. Next. And that allows us to measure neurological effectiveness by using the eye movement tracking to see what was noticed, and then the neurological tracking to understand, did it make a connection, and was it then memorized? Did people remember what they saw? And that creates an overall neurological response or effectiveness measure that allows us to understand different ways that different store situations can connect with consumers' hearts and minds. For example, if you put the right food and beverage next to each other, what we find is very interesting. Their neurological response goes up not just for the beverage, but also for the food, because that connection creates power. And in the next one, you see part of what drives it is their visual response. They're looking first at the primary food item, then at the complementary item, in this case a beverage, but it doesn't have to be, and then back at the food item and creating that neurological message in their mind. As a result, we found it very effective here in the Philippines and other parts of the world to create these connections and move from ingredients to recipes. Here are a few examples. I already told you about rum and Coke. What about the Coke float? We put Coca-Cola next to ice cream and create the connection with a Coke float, or sometimes we use Sarsi with a root beer float. We also put Sprite and meat together because in the Philippines many consumers use Sprite to marinate the meat and create a delicious barbecue. And we do the same with Royal True Orange, with shrimp, because not only is it a good marinade, but it makes sure the shrimp looks nice and orange. Here's one of my favorites, Wilkins with infant formula. The consumer's already buying the infant formula in your stores, but what are they using to dilute it? Usually water from home, where you don't make any profit. But if you create that linkage with consumers' minds, you create a recipe that says the way you make infant formulas with Wilkins, then the retailer is able to make profit on both the baby formula itself as well as the Wilkins. And the same is true for Wilkins and vitamins or other types of medications. Now, here's an interesting insight. And this, of course, works with our products, which is what the research was done on, but it certainly works for any complementary item. Next slide, please. Think about this using ketchup with chicken or any kind of items, you get a much stronger neurological response. Now, why is that? That's because you're changing the question from should I buy something, yes or no, next slide please. It becomes a yes or no question. Should I buy this? And you change that to which should I buy? This one or that one? It's a little bit like why when you have young children, you don't ask them, do you want vegetables? You ask them, do you want carrots or peas? It forces them to think about which I want rather than whether I want it. And this will work in all categories. Now, next one, we talked about moving from ingredient to occasion, to recipe, but what about moving from recipe on to occasion? So I'll show you an example here. Next one. Obviously, no one puts breakfast cereal with orange drink. That's not a very good recipe. But it is an occasion. It creates the occasion of breakfast. And so by putting orange drink next to the breakfast cereal, both the orange drink and the breakfast cereal grow in sales. Now, this is an everyday your shopper to feel comfortable in your stores. You want them to be used to your stores. You want them to feel comfortable with the shopping experience. So routine and familiarity is a good thing. But when you see something the same way every time, it becomes like wallpaper. And you stop looking, you stop seeing, and you become less open to new experiences. Next one. So how do you adjust that shopping experience to maybe add just a little bit of surprise and get more active shopping, more browsing? Well, here's a couple of examples. Here's a typical Costco shelf in the US. Costco is a club store in the US. It's boring, and it's always the same. Every time the shopper comes, the shelf looks the same. But the Costco one-time displays, that's completely different. Costco has displays that are only available one time. Next slide, please. That means that every time you enter, there's something on display you've never seen before in a Costco, and you learn over time shopping there that you're not going to see again. That means you must buy it now because it's the only time you're going to have the chance. And because Costco shoppers know that they're getting a good value at Costco, the Costco shopper doesn't even think about, is it a fair price? That's a given. All they think about is, do I want it? And I better act now because it won't be here next time. And it creates what Costco likes to call the treasure hunt mentality, where consumers are looking for today's treasure. And through the treasure hunt mentality, Costco, a big box retailer that sells generally very low-end, everyday items, is one of the nation's largest retailers of Dom Perignon champagne and diamonds. Next one. We found a way to implement a little bit of surprise here in the Philippines. Take a look at this video with me.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to guide you. Find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh. Tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, I'll sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. Oh, find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh. I can count on you.
Now, I can't promise you a 2,239% growth percentage every time you surprise your consumers,